Welcome to the timing section of this course. In this module, we're going to talk all about what is a good haircut time, the phases of a haircut, and the mindset that you need to start working on lowering your haircut times. So let's get right into it. So the first question that we have to answer is, what is a good haircut time? In a lot of the examples that I use in my videos and trainings, I'm saying 30 minutes because that's what we do. But for you, it might be different. It may be shorter, it may be longer. So it really depends, and I'm going to show you how we can kind of work through to figure out what is the timing that you need to shoot for. And there's basically two scenarios that we're going to go over. The first is if you work for somebody else. Second is if you are self-employed and you have some control over your timing. So let's talk about the first one. If you are employed by somebody else, because this is a relatively simple one. So if you're employed, then the time standard is whatever the employer says it is. So the time standard for the shop. The reason why is because hopefully the owner knows what they're doing in terms of pricing. Hopefully they watched our pricing, how to price your haircuts course, or they learned it from somebody else. So they know that if they say that your haircut is supposed to be 30 minutes, that's what it needs to be in order for the shop to generate enough revenue to pay you, pay the shop bills, and maybe have a little bit of profit after. So if you're employed by somebody else, then the time standard is whatever the time standard is for the shop. So whether it's 15 minutes, whether it's 30 minutes, whether it's 45, an hour, doesn't really matter what the number is, because if you're employed, you don't have control over this anyways. The only thing you can control is, can I get it done in that time? That's what the rest of this is going to be about. But if you're employed, you don't have a say in this, unfortunately, or maybe not unfortunately, but it makes it pretty simple. Like, it is what the shop says it is. Right? Now, if you're self-employed, this is where it becomes a little bit more difficult, because now you have to figure out what makes sense for you. If you are basing your entire system, business model going forward off of 45-minute haircuts, then what if that's not the right, what if you need to be doing 30-minute haircuts instead? And I actually think that as long as the pricing is right based on the time that you want to shoot for, then the timing is almost irrelevant. The challenge becomes, like, let's say you want to do 45-minute haircuts, and then you go through the how to price your haircuts course, and then you see that, oh, okay, for what I would need to charge for this 45-minute service, I'm not sure if my clients would be willing to pay that. So then you got to go back to this and be like, okay, so what if I did 30-minute haircuts? And then you got to redo your pricing. So they're both really important. You need to know what you need to be pricing, and then the pricing is dependent on the timing. So if the timing changes, then the pricing has to change. So if you want to go from 30 to 45-minute haircuts, then you're gonna have to charge more. But that's for the pricing your haircuts course. I just bring that up as an example, is like, you need both. It's like, you can't just figure out just the timing. You also need to figure out, if you're self-employed, what do I need to charge based on my timing? So once you got the timing down, then you can figure out the price after that. So when you're self-employed, you have to figure out how much, it's based on how much you need to make in order to cover your bills, but also your income goal. So the first place I would start, if you're self-employed, this also includes if you own a barbershop and you run a barbershop, what you need to generate either for yourself, if it's just you, or for the business, in order to cover all the bills, pay all the barbers, pay yourself, and maybe have a little bit of profit left over, hopefully, right? So the first thing you need to do is figure out what's your income goal or revenue goal. So I'll do income or revenue. And then once you figure that out, it's fairly simple. So I'm going to use the example of your self-employed, and I'm going to use $100,000 as an example, because a lot of people like to want to shoot for that as a revenue goal. The number doesn't really matter. So it could be 100,000, it could be 1,000,000, it could be 10 million. It doesn't really matter. What you need to figure out is how much you want to make, and then you can work backwards from there. So, and I don't necessarily think you should base it off of how much I want to make, but like what you need to make in order to keep the business open, to pay your bills, etc. So we're just going to use 100 grand, but the formula is the same. It's basically just your income goal. So I'm just going to put goal divided by how many hours you how many hours you work, we'll say. So really, let's use the example for income. We're going to say 100K divided by 2,000. So if you work 40 hours a week, so if you want to make 100 grand a year and you work about 40 hours a week times 50 weeks, let's say you take 2 weeks off, you're sick, whatever, vacation, that's going to equate to 2,000 hours. That's where the 2,000 came from. So 100 grand divided by 2,000 equals $50. This is just an example. So you need to figure out what the right number is for you. I would say this is pretty common. That's why I'm going off of this. If you're doing this for a barber shop, then this might need to be $1 million. Then this would be how many hours your team works total. The math is the same. It's just the numbers might get bigger or smaller, whatever. So that's going to equal what you need to make in terms of revenue per hour worked. So if you want to make 100 grand and you work about 40 hours a week, you need to make about $50 an hour in order to do that. So as you can see, like 100 grand is not really out of reach not really as much out of reach as you might think. The challenge is you have to do this every single hour that you're working. So you essentially have to be 100% booked. So keep that in mind. So you may want to shoot for more than whatever this number ends up being for you, because you're going to have cancellations, no shows, slow days, etc. So you maybe want to shoot for like 70 an hour. So let's use the 50 for an example. So now that we know what we need to shoot for per hour revenue wise, how does that help us determine what a good haircut time is? Well, we know we need to shoot for this number, and now we can work backwards from there. So you can do $50 an hour by doing this. So you can either do a 60-minute haircut and charge 50 for it. You can do 30 minutes and charge 25. And then you could break it down however you need. I mean, the simplest way to do this actually is to take this number right here and divide this by 50. And that gives you your rate per minute. So, or divided by 60. So 50 divided by 60 equals, so this equals about 83 cents. And that's called your rate per minute. So then whatever you use that to determine your price. So let's say you want to do a 45-minute service. So if we take 45, and we times it by 0.83, that gives us about 37 and change, and we're always going to round up. So we're going to charge $38 for that haircut. And let's say you want to do 15-minute haircuts. Same thing. So you take the 15 and times it by 0.83, and that's going to give you 12 and change, and we're going to round up. So you could charge $13 for a 15-minute haircut. Because if you're getting 4 haircuts an hour, that times 4 is going to should at least equal what you need to shoot for revenue-wise. Hopefully that's making sense. So this is how you determine what is a good haircut time for you. I can't give you a blanket answer because it really depends on the type of barbershop you work in. If it's a volume-based place where it's like in and out as fast as possible, you're probably going to be on the lower end of the spectrum. So the price is going to be lower, timing is going to be lower. But if you're in the middle somewhere, you're probably going to be here 30 to 45 minutes. And then if you're like a high-end type of barbershop or salon, then you're probably going to be here. So that's why I can't tell you like you need to shoot for a certain time, because it depends on what your business needs. For us, we started here at 15-minute haircuts. And then over time, we wanted to kind of differentiate ourselves from like the franchise, quick cut salons out there. So we ended up slowly extending the times, and you can go in between too using the same formula. So we did 20-minute haircuts using that. We did 25, and then now we're at 30, and we're probably going to stick there for a while. So we're at 30 minutes for our haircuts, and we did the same thing, but we actually charge 40 because that's what we need for our business. So that's why, it depends on what you need for your business. So that's how to figure out what's a good time for you. There's a little bit of math involved, but you just want to start with what you need to make or what you want to make per year divided by how many hours you work. That gives you this is how much you need to make per hour. You divide that by 60 to figure out what the rate per minute is. And then you figure out, based on your pricing, where you want to be, where that falls timing wise, and which of these is you think is going to be the most achievable, right? So that's if you're self-employed, if you own a barbershop. If you're employed, then your owner probably already did this. I did it already for my shop. So that's how we came up with the time standards. And it's difficult for barbers, I think, unless you've kind of walked them through this process, because they might feel like they can't get it done in 15 minutes or 30 minutes, but it's like, that's what we need to do in order to cover the bills. Most people are out there that are just guessing, right? They have no idea what they should be charging. But we didn't do that. We started that way, but I just sat down and I did this math and I said, okay, we need to charge $40 for 30 minutes. That's what we need, right? If you're taking longer than, say, if your time standard is 30 minutes, or if that's what you want to shoot for, but you're doing it in 45 an hour, then you're actually losing money, right? You're losing the shop money, because what should have taken 30 minutes, you stretch it out to 60, and you're only getting, in this example, 25. You're never going to hit your income goal by doing that, which is why timing is so important. It's one of the easiest ways that you can instantly unlock more income for yourself, is simply by just meeting the time standard. Not even like having to go faster, but like doing a little bit of math. This took me just a few minutes to do, and it'll probably be the same for you. But just doing a little bit of math and figuring out what you need to do revenue-wise per hour in order to hit your income goal. And then from there, you come up with the time. Or if you're employed and you work for somebody else, then you just need to meet the time standard for whatever that it is for the shop. So now let's talk a little bit about the mindset of why I feel like a lot of barbers run behind on their appointments. And we're gonna use this 30-minute example, but just don't let that confuse you. It's whatever it is for you, whatever makes sense for you. I'm gonna keep using 30 minutes probably for the rest of this course, but you need to remember that that's what works for me and that's what I know best. So that's why I use that number a lot. So the main thing to keep in mind when it comes to the mindset is you don't actually have, and it actually doesn't really matter what the time is. This is still true, I think. So you don't actually have whatever the time, that much time, right? And this is why, is because you have, let's say, 30 minutes, but if you spend the entire time on just their haircut for the 30 minutes, then you're automatically behind. So why is that, right? Because you still got to keep in mind that there is and we'll get into this in the consultation, in the haircut phases a little bit more, but there's you guys still got to do the consultation, even if it's a quick one, like it's a repeat client, and you're just like, same as last time, like that's still going to add a little bit of time, right? And if it's a new client, the consultations usually take longer. Then you actually got the haircut itself. And keep in mind, this applies to all other services, like beard trims, shaves, whatever. I'm using a haircut as an example, but really everything in this course is going to be really applicable to any service that you do. But you got the haircut, and then you got the checkout and cleanup, because they got to pay, right? Unless you're doing free haircuts, at some point you're going to have to check them out, take their payment, and then you got to clean up and get ready for the next one. So minimum, these three things have to happen with every single haircut. And the challenge is, a lot of barbers that I see fall behind a lot spend all of the 30 minutes here, and that doesn't leave time to do anything else. So even if you get just the haircut time down to 30 minutes, you're going to still be behind, because you still got to do the consultation. Let's say that's quick. Like best case scenario, it's like a minute, right? 1 minute. And let's say you check them out, and again, best case scenario, it's 1 minute. Well, if you're spending the entire 30 minutes on just the haircut, now you're at 32 minutes, right? And that, if you're fully booked, you're doing that with every single client, then you're going to be behind all that. Even if it's just a couple minutes, clients might not mind that, but it's one of those things that, like, there's these hidden costs during service that a lot of barbers don't account for. They think like, oh yeah, I'm doing it in 30 minutes. I should be able to stay on time. Well, what about the consultation? What about the checkout? What about if you have to use the bathroom in between? What if your client shows up late? What if the phone rings or a walk-in comes in and you got to step away and go help them out for a second? All of these things add up. So you don't actually have 30 minutes or whatever to do the haircut. You only have, it depends on what the haircut is, but let's say best case scenario, you have actually 28 minutes. So that's what you need to do the haircut in this example, just to stay on time. And keep in mind, this is best case scenario. For a new client, the consultation might be 5 minutes long. And the checkout also might be 5 minutes long because they're new. They don't know how your system works. You know, maybe they got to run to their car and grab their wallet, whatever. So this is best case scenario. You have to do the haircut in 28 minutes. Okay. So the first major thing when it comes to lowering your haircut times to keep in mind is that you don't have that time. Whatever the time is, that's not how much time you have. You have to take away like at least 5 to 10 minutes for the other stuff. Getting the haircut done in 20 minutes because that leaves me time to do the other things, right? To put more time and effort into the consultation, to make sure I clean up and check out the clients properly, and use the bathroom or grab a snack, or start laundry if I need to. Because if you're spending the entire time here, and I'll go into the shop and I can just tell the barbers are struggling with time based on how much laundry has piled up. Because if they're spending the entire haircut on, if they're spending the entire time on just the haircut, then there's going to be piles of laundry, right? The shop might look disgusting and they don't even have time to sweep because they don't realize that if they're just cutting the entire day, they don't have time to do anything else. And even then, they'll still fall behind. But that's one of the major mindsets to keep in mind when it comes to lowering your haircut times. I think this is where you start, is once you know what your haircut times should be, you need to keep in mind that you don't actually have whatever it says over here. Once you figure that out, I would take away like 5 to 10 minutes and that's what you got, right? So the last thing we'll talk about, which definitely relates to this, are the phases of the haircut. So we're going to go over this a little bit more in detail. So we'll have the consultation. We got to do that with every client, even if it's a short one, even if it's just same as last time, we got to do that, right? Because sometimes they switch it up. And then what I like to call the first step is debulk. Step number is blend. And then you got detail. And the last step is checkout and cleanup. So like we talked about, this consultation could be anywhere from, I would say, 1 to 5 minutes, maybe less if it's a repeat client and they just saw him last week and it's like, hey, are we changing anything up? No? Okay. Maybe that takes like 30 seconds. All right, and then the debulk. So I pretty much debulk with 90% of the haircuts I do. That's the very first thing I do, right? And then, so that might take a few minutes, but let's start at the end here. Let's go to the end. So we're gonna say that the checkout, if it's a repeat client, might take a minute. If it's a new client, it might take up to 5 minutes. Maybe they want to buy a product, right? This is something that happens a lot in our store. So they want to buy a product. They want to set up their next appointment before they leave. So that adds time to the checkout. So best case scenario, like over here, we have 28 minutes. Worst case scenario, these things in the beginning and the end are taking away 10 minutes. So anywhere from 2 to 10 minutes gone right off the bat. But then we got to do the haircut. Right? So the haircut, I like to break it up in 3 phases, okay? And I like to spend the majority of my time here in the detail work. So I'm going to probably try to allocate at least 10 minutes. Let's say 5 to 10. 5 to 10. Because if it's like a simple haircut, like a 2 or 3 on the sides and a trim on top, the detail is just for me, like making sure I get the trimmers around their hairline, giving them a neck shave, maybe styling it, going over any like checking for missed hairs and maybe smoothing out the blend a little bit. Whereas a detail for like a skin fade might include all that, but I still got to go back and maybe refine the blend a little bit. And then this section right here is going to take is where I'm going to try to go the fastest because I want to get to here. I want to spend most of my time in the detail part of the haircut. So I want to debulk and blend as quickly as possible so that I can spend most of my time doing the detail work. So I think a lot of barbers that are struggling with timing, one of the reasons why that may be happening is you're spending too much time in the first one or two phases of the haircut, right? And you have to keep in mind that it doesn't need to look perfect the entire haircut, right? It's okay to leave a little bit of line in there or some missed hairs because that's where you can go out and catch this in the last step. But if you're spending the entire haircut trying to make sure it looks perfect all the way through, that really adds time. And we'll get into that in the cutting section of this course, but you really want to make sure that you're going through your steps and not picking up that clipper more times than necessary, right? So the first couple parts of the haircut as quickly as possible. So getting that length off. So removing a lot of the length just so you can see what you're doing, I would consider that debulking. And then you got the blending. So now you're tying lengths in together. So maybe you got cut the sides, you cut the top, and now you start tying everything together. This is when you're changing guards and everything. And then the last step would be you're smoothing everything out, you're refining everything, you're going around the ears and hairline. That's when the razor work comes in. And if you do a skin fade, then there's even more detail work involved there. But this is how I have kind of figured out for myself what works in trying to stay on time, is trying to figure, okay, right off the bat, I need to take away some time for the consultation and checkout. So, and then I want to spend most of my time, for me, I want to spend most of my time here in the detail section. So then I need to get, and I only have a set amount of time, I got 30 minutes. So I need to spend the minimal amount of time here. So I found it really helpful to think about it this way. And I also found it helpful to think about it in terms of stages. So for example, if I know, let's say the appointment started at 1 and it's 30 minutes. So the appointment's supposed to end at 1:30. So I found this helpful for myself to think about it this way. The appointment started at 1. The appointment's supposed to end at 1:30 because that's when the next one's coming in. So I find, just like I don't know if you guys do this, but when I'm getting ready for work, and once I've kind of figured out, okay, this is the best route to get to work, then I know, okay, if I don't leave the house by a certain time, I'm not going to get to work on time because traffic, the travel time, whatever. So it's actually the same exact thing with haircuts. So I know that if I don't get to the detail portion of this haircut by a certain time, I'm behind. And this is why I can know before I even get to the end of the appointment time whether I'm going to be behind or not. And I think it's one of the best things I've learned to kind of be mindful of. But like we got the midpoint, right? So when I am doing a haircut and it's 30 minutes, I'm wearing a watch, I'm being mindful of the time, and let's say I start the haircut right on time, 1 o'clock. I want to be done with all 3 of these things here by the time I get to the midway point. Does that always happen? No. But ideally, that's what I want. That's where I want to be. So we start the haircut at 1 and we're done with the first 3 phases, ideally by here. Because if we finish the haircut and start the checkout, let's say it takes 5 minutes, right? At 1:25, we should be checking them out. We should start the checkout, right? And let's say it takes 5 minutes. You're rebooking them, you're talking about product, and then you got to go back to your station and clean up because then at 1:30, your next appointment is here. They're probably waiting in the chair, in the lobby, right? So that last 5 minutes is gone. So this leaves me 10 minutes to do my detail work. Hopefully that makes sense. So when you do a haircut time, and it might vary depending on the haircut, right? But let's say you have a 30-minute slot for an appointment and you start the haircut on time. In my opinion, what's worked for me, you want to get through the first few phases by about midway through the haircut because you got to save time for some detail work and then you got to save time to check them out. So you really only have 15 minutes in this scenario to get like 80% of the haircut done and then focus on the detail work to that's when you take it from like a 5 or 6, on a scale of 1 to 10 to like a 7, 8, 9, 10 haircut is in this part right here. But if you're spending the entire time here, you'll never have time to do the detail work, or you'll do it, but it'll be way past the end of the appointment time, and that's how you fall behind. So I would say not rush, but try to focus a lot of your energy on when you're trying to lower your haircut times, focus a lot of your energy on these steps. Like, how can I make the consultation as short as possible? How do I doesn't mean rush it. You want to ask questions, and we'll get into that in the consultation part of this course. And you want to figure out how can I debulk and blend in the least amount of steps, so that way I can spend the majority of the next phase of this haircut on the detail part, right? Because if you are going through this like I do pretty quickly, you're going to make mistakes. Not necessarily mistakes that are like unfixable, but like it's not going to be pretty, like, and that's if you've ever seen like Ivan Zoot, he's got the Guinness World Record for fastest haircut. He talks about this a lot, and he's like, you want to get like 80% of the haircut done, and then at the end is when you go and you clean it all up and refine it, right? It doesn't have to be perfect in every single step. So this has been really, really helpful for me. So I just keep in mind this is how you can use time to your advantage. So start the haircut at whatever time the haircut's supposed to start at, and hopefully by midway through, whatever it is for you, you're at least done with the first few phases of the haircut. Focus a lot of the time then on the detail work, and then check them out, clean up, get ready for your next one. So hopefully you found that helpful. Now you know what is a good time for you, or at least how to figure it out. You know the mindset, knowing that you don't actually have 30 minutes. And then we broke it down here why you don't actually have 30 minutes, because of the different phases that come throughout the haircut. But you can use these little like checkpoints here to see even before the time comes up whether you're going to be behind or not. And I think these are things that barbers like subconsciously already know. But once you consciously start being mindful of the fact, like, okay, this person is going to take me, would normally take me about 25, 30 minutes, and he showed up 10 minutes late. So that means I don't actually have 20 minutes now. I have to get this haircut done in like 15 for an example, and then using checkpoints to be like, because you can get ahead of that too. And like, let's say your next appointment's already here, and you haven't gotten to the midpoint of the haircut yet, so you already know you're going to be behind. So you can do a little bit of customer service and be like, hey man, I think I'm going to be running a little bit behind. Just want to give you a heads up. People really appreciate that. So you can use this a lot of different ways. But in the next section, we're going to talk about tools and equipment that can actually help with lowering your haircut times.